Even the best of the best grandmasters make mistakes. This video will go over the top 7 worst mistakes made by grandmasters. Some of these mistakes are missing a couple of pawns, while others are as bad as missing a checkmate in one move. So subscribe if you're new around here, like this video if you enjoy it, and let's dive in to the worst blunders made by grandmasters. Starting with blunder number 7, we have Topalov with the black pieces, and I'm just going to skip towards the area where they made the mistake in these because that is where we want to focus. And the mistake happens right around here where Topalov plays the move queen to h5. Now it's not immediately clear why this is a blunder, but the point that you have to understand here is that the queens are facing each other even though there's multiple pieces in between, which allows for this very beautiful knight to e5 move, and after bishop takes knight, not taking back, but instead knight to h6 check, unleashing the attack on the queen with check, and after, for example, knight takes, you're going to lose your queen, which is why Topalov actually resigned in this position. In number 6, we have some big names. We have Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces and Viswanathan Anand with the black ones. And this is a blunder that Viswanathan Anand did. So again, we'll go to the area where they made the blunder. But I encourage you to go slower through these moments if you want to look at the moves that led to the blunder. And the blunder here was a little bit smaller than some of the other blunders that you'll see, like the maiden 1s and maiden 2s that you'll see later in the video, which is why it comes in this position. But it still is indeed a pretty big blunder, and it happened right here. So in this position, Viswanathan Anand with the black pieces had the opportunity to play the very beautiful knight to e5. The idea being, if the rook takes the knight, well then you take the rook here and you win the exchange. If instead, after knight takes e5, the rook takes the rook, well now if you take, they'll take your knight. So instead, you play this knight to c4 check, a very important intermediate move. Now if the king moves somewhere random, well then you can simply take back the rook. But if the king challenges the knight, so after takes, the idea is for white to take back the knight, well then you can give this check here on b2, the king has to move, it cannot attack the knight anymore, and then you win the rook back, and you're simply up material. So a pretty smaller blunder here, only losing a couple of pawns, but you know, at the grandmaster level, that is still a huge mistake by Viswanathan Anand. For number 5, we have another game with Viswanathan Anand. This time he has the white pieces, and he's playing Garry Kasparov, who actually made the blunder. This is possibly the worst blunder of Garry Kasparov's career, and he actually had a reaction video of real time when he figured out that the move he made was a blunder. So I'll show that once we get to the position where he blundered. And it's coming up very shortly, and you can see here kind of the critical moments leading up to the blunder where now the queens are facing each other. You can't really move out your bishop without losing your queen, which explains the move rook f2, freeing the bishop. And after Kasparov played a knight to d5, you could just move your bishop away. White instead decided to go rook e1, which is of course also good. And here, Kasparov blundered with the move queen takes e3. Before we talk about why this is a blunder and go over this position, let me show you the reaction that he had when he found out that this was a blunder.
Two pawns up, technically winning position. Yeah. He's just exchanging pieces now. It's all over. Put your king on a square like. What's the queen takes g4? What's he overlooked?
So clearly a pretty bad move if he has that reaction, and the reason that this move is bad is because if white takes, then you know this is completely fine. In the end, black is still up the extra 2 pawns that they were up previously. However, Vishy found the winning idea, queen takes g4. Now unleashing an attack on the queen, unleashing an attack on the rook, so in a funny way this is actually a fork. Critically, the queen cannot take the rook, it's defended, you know, so saving the rook loses the queen, saving the queen loses the rook. and you're just completely losing in the game. Castling was played, which is the best move, and this isn't completely winning. You lose the queen for the rook, and black was already up 2 pawns previously, but after queen takes h3, white is up a considerable material, but also just their pieces are more dominating, and black is definitely the one here that is trying to survive, which just a couple of moves ago, it was the complete opposite case when black was up 2 pawns. Number 4, we have Karpov, this time blundering with the black pieces. This is one of the most famous blunders ever, and it's such a basic idea that it's actually one of the first tactics you learn when you start playing chess, that it's just incredible that a Grandmaster ended up blundering here. So again, we'll get to the critical moments, and it happens very soon, right around here after the move knight h5, the bishop drops back, bishop to d6 was played, which doesn't seem horrible until you find the critical queen d1, simple fork here. There's just nothing you can do. Black resigned here, and this is definitely Karpov's, one of his, if not his worst blunder ever, because forks are just the most basic tactics, one of the first you learn. In number 3, we have Sergey Karjakin with the black pieces, and he is the one who blundered here. So again, we'll go through the moves in the opening and get to the critical moments where you see the blunder actually happen, which is not for a while. This was an endgame blunder, and it's actually after a very, very long game. So we'll kind of go through these moves very quickly here and reach the position where the blunder happened, which after around 100 moves of playing, so there's definitely that fatigue aspect, which is maybe explains a little bit why Karjakin made this blunder, but nonetheless, king g5 here is just unexcusable, simply hanging a rook. With the latest move, knight to b3, you have to ask yourself, what is he threatening, what is his idea, and he's clearly attacking the rook. So king g5 hangs the rook, and essentially loses the game here for black. So one of the most basic questions you're taught to ask yourself after your opponent's move, what is he attacking? Clearly, black kind of forgot to ask that question here. Number 2, we have Kramnik, this time with the black pieces, and he's playing actually the Deep Fritz computer. So he's playing a computer, so this is definitely not an easy game, but the blunder that he made was not one that you should be making against anything, regardless of whether it's as strong as a computer or not. Now the blunder actually happened again in a more endgame phase when more pieces were traded off, so again we'll skip to that position, and it actually happened right around here when Kramnik played the move queen e3, and if you're going to trade here, the idea is quite nice. I mean, you're playing against someone that is a computer, so you definitely, the more you trade, the easier it will be, but the sad thing is, the move queen to e3 actually hangs checkmate in 1. And he, I guess, forgot that after this trade that happened here, where one way or another both players ended up winning a rook, the knight was actually in a very strong position with the help of the queen. So after queen to e3, queen to h7 is checkmate. So a very, very strange type of blunder, just simply blundering checkmate in 1, one of the rarest blunders you're going to see from a Grandmaster. Before we look at number 1, I want to go over an honorable mention. This one technically did not happen from a Grandmaster, because at the time there was not a Grandmaster title. It was Chigorin who played this in 1892, and I'm not exactly sure when the Grandmaster title was invented, but in 1892 it was certainly did not exist back then. So there was not a Grandmaster title, which is why Chigorin was not a Grandmaster, but he certainly was one of the best in the world at the time, which is why this is certainly a very high-class blunder that happened here. So let's see what happened. So Chigorin is playing with the white pieces, and you can see that very early on the queens were traded, and we get into this sort of position where black ends up having some very powerful rooks that he does not want to trade, and this bishop here does a very important role of defending h2, something that unfortunately Chigorin forgot about when he made the move bishop to b4, attacking the rook, and blundered rook takes h7, rook takes h2, king to g1, and rook d to g2. Simply checkmate. And you gotta always ask yourself, is my piece doing something important? Before you move it away, quickly double check, is it doing anything important on some of its other diagonals for a bishop, for example? And clearly here, it was doing a very important job of holding h2. And now, for the worst blunder by a Grandmaster of all time, it is Magnus Carlsen. It's only fitting to put Magnus Carlsen's blunder at number 1, as he is currently the best in the world. So let's see what happened. He was playing with the white pieces, and this blunder happened after a lot of moves. So again, we'll skip through the phase of the game where, the moves were, of course, Grandmaster level, and we'll get to the blunder that happened, which is really towards the end of the game. In fact, it's one of the last moves of the game, because as you see, we get to this rook endgame, where Magnus, again with the white pieces, ends up having one extra pawn. Now he decides, well, hey, let's try to save this pawn, make it a queen, e5. However, the kings are facing each other, and he forgot to check that there's no checkmates, and rook c1 is actually just checkmate. He blundered a checkmate by playing e4. Now, if he were to try to save himself from the checkmate, then he would lose the pawn. So, he kind of prioritized in a way keeping this pawn safe instead of checking for checkmates. Of course, it's much more important to keep your king safe than a pawn, but that kind of explains what happened. He really, of course, valued this pawn. It's right now the only advantage he has, so he tried to keep it safe by pushing it, but of course, by doing so, ended up blundering this this checkmate here. So those were the 7 incredible blunders that Grandmasters have done. Hopefully, it kind of encouraged you that even the best players are human, and everyone makes mistakes. It's how you improve, it's how you learn, and you should not be scared or sad to make mistakes. Thank you guys for watching this video. Subscribe if you're new around here, like this video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.